whenever I think about it, I'm like, okay, so with all the automation going on, basically any intern level architect tasks can get automated. Like, what will those students do?
About to enter the Archgyan podcast.
Archgyan podcast.
India's first and very own architecture podcast, where you'll hear the insights, experiences, and journeys from India's leading architects. No matter what your skill level is, together we'll build on our knowledge and share architecture's greatest stories ever told. Now, here's your host, Manish Paul Simon.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Archgyan podcast. I'm super stoked to be sharing this episode with you guys because we have a guest all the way from Ukraine. This guy is truly an exceptional mind because he's achieved so much in a very short span of time. He presently works as a BIM manager and he's also a computational designer. This is Pavlo Menshykh. Now let me give you a brief about Pavlo. So he completed his Bachelor of Architecture and also his MArch from Lviv Polytechnic National University. He presently works as a BIM manager for Savitsky Design based in Ukraine. And he also works part-time as a computational designer for Finch 3D. I hope you know that Finch 3D was famous for the plan which is automated. And he also works for Splash Modular, which is a prefabrication company based in Canada. I don't know how he gets all this done, but you'll definitely find out in this episode. Here's what you're going to learn in this episode. So he shares how he got into architecture, his experience in architecture school, how he picked up on the various softwares and coding languages, also about renting out bikes in Washington, D.C. and how that helped him to work more. Design automation, of course, Blender, IFC, 3D scans, photogrammetry, BIM in Ukraine, BIM ISO standards, and loads more. Like you heard, this episode is going to be jam-packed with a lot of information. And there is some amount of jargon, but nothing to worry. Just head to our website, archgyan.com/30. And you'll find links to whatever is too technical for you and which will help you understand better on today's topic, which is design automation. I'm sure you're going to love this episode. And I'm sure it's going to help you in your career and how you're going to practice architecture in the future. Before I head to the episode, it would be great if you guys could follow us on Instagram. We go by the handle of Archgyan. I think you know the spelling, which is ARCHGYAN. And also follow us on Patreon by supporting us. It would be great if you guys could support us even with $1 because this podcast is a one-man show. I'm running this on my own. It takes a lot of effort to release one episode. So please guys, please do support and it would keep me motivated to release at least 2 episodes a week and provide value and help you in your career in architecture. You can head to patreon.com/Archgyan. With that said, this is Design Automation with Pavlo Menshykh. He starts off by sharing how he got into architecture. Let's go.
I can't say I wanted to be an architect from when I was like 3, when I started getting like conscious mind. But I always I always knew I like technical stuff. So I'm mostly an engineer, all my life. But I also like some creativity. I liked playing with Lego and stuff. So around 13, 14 years, okay. I decided that architecture would probably be a good starting point. And also considering that when you enroll for a bachelor degree, it's not like you have to pursue that career. And I always thought that if I go architecture, I could switch to a construction engineer, to a designer. So it opens many paths. It's a very flexible education. So I've enrolled as an architecture student, and I decided to pursue a more specific renovation course in architecture. Okay. Like in my first university, you had to choose it was very basic, but some specialization.
So this is a 4-year course.
Yeah. Bachelor was 4 years. So I started learning as a renovation architecture student, and it was very fascinating because at my university, it's kind of old school. So it's a plus and a minus. So we didn't have too much education in software. Like we weren't taught Revit or Archicad or like at all Grasshopper or anything computational design related. But we were taught to draw with ink, like with a pencil, with our bare hands. And it just gave like a very good, it was a very good foundation to be an actual architect, not like just like a software user, but just an architect as a general. So if you had a very good education on just like engineering stuff, structural stuff, like general composition, colors, just painting, just all the things that architects would study like 50 years ago, which made them great, basically, like the most renowned computational design studios, like Zaharit architects, like for example, Zaharit, she didn't study Grasshopper at the university. She just studied.
She finished math and then she got into architecture, right? And
she studied more basic things, and that's what my university was good at. And just like a student, when I first got introduced into like architectural software when I was studying for about like 7 months already. I didn't even use it, just maybe like basic Microsoft Word or something to just write lectures. And I immediately fell in love with it. So it was the first architectural software was Archicad for me. And within a week from when I was introduced to it, I already started making some drawings there. I would print them out and then redraw them in ink just to like hand in my work, because it was mandatory to make it by hand.
This is like a trick you guys used in school, or was it just that you did that?
Many people did it, but usually at a later stage because most people got familiar with, for example, we were taught Archicad. Most people got familiar with it at like 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th year. And I just loved it so much that I got into it like within a week. So I just like started using it a lot, but still like I did like to do hand drawings. I did just like to sit with a piece of paper, do some like math. I really loved math. I loved architectural physics and all that stuff. But like in parallel, I was getting deeper and deeper and into, at that time, Archicad. And I really loved the automation part. So I just started getting better and better at it, like way above the university level. For example, at the 2nd year, we had we've had a course in like a more in-depth course at Archicad. And I was so good at that point that the teacher just gave me the highest mark and set me like to watch after other students when they passed the exam. So he didn't even give me the exam because he knew that I would just like roll over everything. And and he just like gave me the task to look after other students so they wouldn't cheat. That's how much I fell in love with it.
But you spoke about automation, right? I've never heard of automation in Archicad. So could you tell us more about how you implemented automation back then?
So it's not like so automation, like for example Grasshopper, you can do automation like drawings could be generated by some rules or schedules or something like that. So you have the schedules in Archicad, you have like live links between elements, so they would get like just named after each other, right? So I'm actually familiar with Revit. I don't use it as much as Archicad. because like historically in my country, Archicad is more popular, and the offices in my town aren't very large. So it's usually around 20 people. We just have probably 2 to 3 offices with 50 people that have like all the engineers and stuff. And for a smaller office, like I think that up to 30 people, Archicad is probably better than Revit because it has a much easier learning curve. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well in large team with a lot of engineers. So at that point, switching to Revit might be a good idea. But still, like everything can be done with Archicad as a base. So it's not like an inferior software to Revit. I didn't think that way at all. But it's not just like a biased opinion. I do use both.
Yeah, I think in terms of flexibility of design, Revit feels more rigid compared to Archicad, right?
Yeah, so the main thing for me is Revit requires a lot of structuring. Like Revit really requires a BIM manager. Even if the team is small, like 5 people, it already requires like a pro user or a BIM manager. But because otherwise things will get really complicated. On the other hand, in Archicad, it's much more flexible. You can just do things the way you like, and it will work in the end in some way. It won't be very efficient, it won't be very fast, but it will work. And in Revit, the things can just go horribly wrong.
Yeah, I can relate to that. All right, so you became a pro in Archicad, and then what made you decide to do a master's in architecture?
So to be honest, like in my country, just like most people pursue masters. Okay. And for me, I already got a job. Like I got my first job at my last year of bachelor studies. So I thought that I can pretty much make it to like. I can make a 9 to 5 job and the university at the same time. And plus masters has less learning hours. It's more flexible. You get to speak with your tutors more. You can do, like you can pass exams in like more flexible times. So it should be even easier to combine a job and university studies. And I've had really good marks at my bachelor studies, and I just I got a scholarship for masters, and I could combine it with my work. So I thought like I really like the generic architectural studies because like Archicad, you can Google some like lessons, you can go through documentation and learn things, but you can't learn to be like a generic architect by yourself. You really need a university for that. Like no courses will give you that information. So that's why I enrolled in a master's studies program in my university, and it had an agreement with a university in Poland. So it's a neighboring country. They have an agreement, and they provide UNESCO scholarship.
Oh, wow.
So like after studying for a year in my like hometown university, I started studying in Lubin University in Poland in parallel. It wasn't like an Erasmus program. It wasn't double studies. It was actually double studies. So I was studying full time in my hometown and in Lubin. It was about 6-hour bus drive with the border clearance. Oh, wow. So it was manageable, and I've had to take them in parallel only for 6 months, so it wasn't a big problem.
And you were working at the same time, right?
No. When I started studying at 2 universities, I've quit my job because it wouldn't be manageable.
Okay. Yeah, I thought like generally most of the people out there would, since you said that you could manage both your work and masters, it's a general norm out there.
Yeah, but I couldn't manage three things, like three really major things, like a 9-to-5 job and 2 full-time studies. So I finished my master's in Lviv, and then in about 6 more months, I've got a master's in Lubin because they could take some of my marks from Lviv because they had an agreement, and I didn't have to go through all of the study program there. Only I basically had to take like 12 subjects and then pass a diploma, and it was done. I've received a second master's diploma.
Right. And how different was it compared to your bachelor or the master's in architecture?
It was really different from studying in Ukraine because so Poland is a part of the European Union. So firstly, they have European Union building codes, and I wasn't familiar with those. I've had to take time and learn those, and in Lviv, it was very old school. We would just attend classes, study there, and everything. But in Lubin, we often had so we went to construction a lot on our engineering course.
Nice.
We studied many things on the actual building site. It was I don't know, more playable style.
Yeah, hands-on, and you got to know more about the site, right?
I already knew about this site since I was working for a year and a half or almost 2 years as an architect, but at that time. But it was really cool to go there with a teacher, and it all the teachers were in their 40s, 50s, so they're much more experienced than me, and I've had a lot to learn from them. And because of the UNESCO scholarship, it was affordable. I wish I went to architectural school in London, but that's just unmanageable money. And with a scholarship, it's still like a European Union.
Awesome. So you completed your master's and your bachelor, and you were like a pro in Archicad. What was your next steps after this?
So my first steps in computational design actually started from Archicad. So it has automation like schedules and all the general stuff you have in Revit. It handles library parts differently, so they are kind of more parametric in Revit, just to edit by hand. So you can draw parts, set some dependencies, and it will work. In Archicad, on the other hand, you can just draw as in SketchUp and then just save it as an object, or you can go the other route. So Archicad has a proprietary coding language called GDL.
Right.
It's described as a graphic description language, and it allows you to create completely parametric objects. Not in the way you do it in Revit.
Yeah.
And it's much more in depth than Revit families. So you just write your object in code completely. There's no saving lines or geometry or everything like that. You have to write the geometry in every piece of geometry has to be written in code. And also you can do the 2D representation and 3D differently. All in one object. You can make new parameters and stuff like that. But the thing with GDL is that it's basically a text editor. So the development environment is very outdated, incredibly. It's just like a notepad. But it's not a bad language at all. It has all the necessary information. You can easily do LOD 300, maybe even 400 objects there.
Oh, nice. This is all on the text, right?
Yeah. Wow. So they have a GDL reference guide shipped with Archicad. It's 720 pages for the current version of Archicad.
Don't tell me you went through all that.
Yeah, multiple times, like many times. It's the main source of information, and I've just like when I just started, it was all a mess. I would just like go through it, and I couldn't understand many things. So GDL just has like basic commands. For example, if you want to do a cube, it has like a block or a box command. But if you want to do some evaluation of geometry, it doesn't do it straight out of the box. It has basically no included libraries. You have to go, you have to do the mess yourself. Mm-hmm. Like all the libraries in any program, like in like the Revit API or Grasshopper libraries, they were written by someone from scratch just by using mass. But they are there. And in Archicad, you can do them with mass, but they aren't there. You have to do all yourself, and the community isn't very large. So I started my path with that, and basically I would spend half the time reading the reference guide and half the time like learning at first even basic trigonometry and algebra and all that stuff. At First, I even like had to revise the school level, then university level, then some parts even more in depth. I had to do a lot of math.
So in a way that helped you develop your computational thinking skills, right?
Yes. So when I first opened Grasshopper, it was just like, oh, wow, like everything's here. It's so easy.
Oh, seriously, bro. That's so, for me, yeah, I find it so difficult, when I jump into Grasshopper and all that.
If you started your path from GDL and spent like 2 years there, not trying like even like Dynamo or Grasshopper, they are so much easier than writing something in GDL. Right. You have so many tools and the node system, you can sketch your algorithms very fast. So like I've jumped into Grasshopper. I loved it. And started learning it a lot. It has some logic that's specific to it.
Yeah, like trees and all that, right?
Yeah. So I first started working a lot with nodes and like out of the box components. Mm-hmm. But the more time I've spent there, the more I understood that it's a very generic tool set. So you still have like a specific work, and the tool set is generic. So many things you do aren't very efficient. Mm-hmm. And I started switching to code. At that point, I knew GDL at I don't know what level. Like there are no tests for that, so I can judge myself. And I started learning Python. Nice. Because I also do some photogrammetry and other things, and Dynamo has Python, so I thought it's a very widely used language, and it would be a good starting point. And Archicad also promised to implement Python. It should be in the next version. Okay.
And so is C#, right? C# is also widely used to create Revit add-ins.
Yeah, yes. So to jump ahead, I learned Python, and then in about 2 months, I've also like started learning C# because you basically have to use both. And considering that GDL is a subset of BASIC, so it's kind of very similar to Visual Basic language, mm-hmm. which is the third language used in Grasshopper and in Revit. Right. So, you can start learning. Like many people just learn Grasshopper and they think they can go away with it, but then they understand they have to code. Sometimes they start learning Python and think they're done with it. They know Grasshopper, they know Python, and and everything's great. But no, you have some custom components written in C#. You have the Revit. At some point, you want to start playing with its API, and so basically you have to learn C#. And that after you know Python, you know C#, and you know some. Well, not some at that point. You know how to do things with nodes in Grasshopper. At that point, basically, you're you need just like few weeks to learn also Visual Basic. So at that point, you know it all. Well, not all. Like after that, you start diving into JavaScript and completely custom applications without using Revit, Grasshopper, or anything at all. Just go full custom mode.
All right. Just to back up a bit, just for the benefit of our listeners, could you tell us what exactly an API is?
So it's the interface with which you connect to like application functions, just to like say it in simple words. So Revit API allows you to, for example, create Revit walls with code. So you just open code, define your rules, compile it as a plugin, and the API is a communication interface between code and Revit.
Yeah. So essentially that there are already codes written and then we create extra codes, right?
Yeah. So basically in every language it works that way, because it has to go very low level to create the actual components, so they would be fast. And that's one of the reasons why Revit isn't very fast, actually, because it uses C# and not a lower level programming language like C, for example. But Archicad uses C. So it's like it has pluses and minuses. So Revit is more flexible for development, actually, but it's not cross-platform. You can't use it on macOS, but it's easier to develop there. And with Archicad, it's cross-platform. It has macOS version, but it's harder for developers to use it. And because of that, the plugin ecosystem isn't as large, and it all has the benefits and the drawbacks.
Cool. Awesome. So you've picked up on all these skills. I don't know what an architect would do after you're so good at coding, right? What were your next steps after all this?
I want to get into like full custom things, web-based like playgrounds. So basically, product configuration is becoming quite popular. And currently there are solutions like Shapediver to do that. And I would love to write something simple to just a simple like browser editor, which you can just implement on your website so that people could sketch something. It would create the geometry with basic rules and give you a bill of materials out of that. But all in just web, without the Grasshopper backend or Revit backend or anything like that.
With the UI and all that.
Yeah, just just a website without using the current architectural software.
All right, great. So could you tell us about you presently play a role of BIM manager, right?
Yeah.
So how did you jump into BIM from coding?
I didn't actually switch from being an architect. So at first coding, like for the first 3 years after I started learning GDL, I didn't make a penny out of coding. It was just my hobby. I was doing it at home. Just like I would just like go on the street and be like, okay, so this roof is interesting. I want to make a parametric object of that roof. I would just get home and spend 10, 20, 30, whatever hours until I get it done. And I always focus on getting things done. And so I would still work as an architect full time and play with code. And because of playing with code, I got a much deeper understanding of the software. So I just have like intuition. So if something doesn't work, the knowledge of code, the knowledge how something could have been written, I can just guess what went wrong, and those guesses are almost always correct. Mm-hmm. And because of that kind of sixth sense, I was really good at fixing all of the problems with Archicad in the office. And I was much better in Archicad than anyone else. That's why I got promoted to BIM manager.
Nice.
And in a 20 people office, your BIM manager role isn't just BIM management. You still get to work as an architect. So currently I'm kind of an architect, BIM manager, and computational designer all in one. Mm-hmm. But it makes the job actually more enjoyable because you get to do many things. So in student years, I've actually traveled to the USA. I lived in Washington, D.C.,
right.
And I got a summer job there as a bike rental person.
Okay.
And I was just renting out bikes. And I was alone in the city, and I thought what would I do at home? There's nothing useful. So I thought about getting more hours, but then I was like, okay, so I spent 40 hours here in the burning sun, renting bikes, and it's not very enjoyable. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to spend more hours than 40 a week doing that. So I picked a different job. It was still actually in the sun on the bicycle. It was a bicycle sandwich delivery. But just mixing those two allowed me to work more hours and still have no burnout. Mm-hmm. I could work more, get more money, obviously, and be happy. So that's why I still try to combine architecture, BIM management, and computational design, because I can manage my time and get no burnout, because it's all in one field, so they all supplement each other. Mm-hmm. But they are quite different.
Yeah, and I feel that these days the role of an architect is not just to be an architect, right? It's to go beyond the regular norm.
Yeah, whenever I think about it, I'm like, okay, so with all the automation going on, basically any intern level architect tasks can get automated. What will those students do? Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of time and dedication to learn the more complicated stuff, but the easier jobs just get done by the computer, more and more. So I just don't even know how the world will look with all that automation. I'm not scared for myself because I'm kind of in the avant-garde of those things. But for the people just starting out, it's quite scary. Architecture, even nowadays, it's not a very giving career. You don't get paid a lot. You get a lot of overtime, a lot of stress. Yeah. It's not a very good career path, honestly. It shouldn't be a career at all. It should be your passion. Yeah. But with all the difficulties that would come, I'm kind of scared for them.
But the only difference, what I would say, is between an algorithm and an architect is we perceive art better than algorithms. Or do you feel that would also change because of AI?
The state of AI nowadays is, I don't think it's a major threat for the actual human labor in the very near future, maybe even 10 years. But the algorithms, so the better the software company will manage its plugins, distribution, and openness, the more of them will get done, and the more of the manual repetitive work will get automated. So there will be less intern level labor. But at the current state, for example, only McNeil does this well. Mm-hmm. So only it's very easy to develop a plugin. Well, not very easy. The actual distribution phase of a plugin for Grasshopper or Rhinoceros is easy because you have food for Rhino. You don't have to do a lot of form filling, a lot of like they don't have a set of specific rules how the component should be written. They don't check it. Just if it has no viruses, basically you can upload it. Someone downloads it, tries if it works. No. Almost all of them work. But with Archicad and Revit, they have a more closed ecosystem. They require you to fill out a lot of stuff. They censor you, and it just makes the life of developers much harder. And I think because of that, not many people get into automation now, and not many people work on automating architecture. Firstly, because like the salaries don't force you to do that, or like you don't get paid that much. You need to invest in education. You need to invest a lot of time. The universities don't teach computational design. Like very few of them do at a reasonable level with some coding and stuff. And if someone's a hobbyist, you can just make your own product and expect to get a fortune out of it. You can only expect to get censored and just you need to do re-upload it 10 times before it gets accepted. It's not a very giving environment. But if that changes, things might go pretty fast from there.
Right. But you're also into design automation, right? You work part-time for Finch 3D and also for Splash Modular. So what is a typical process that goes into automating design? Or maybe what happens, what is the backbone of design automation?
I'm not sure I will translate this good, but it's like eating an elephant. It's so huge, you can just grab a fork and start. Okay. You have to divide everything into as small piece as possible, and then get it back together into a big elephant. So you start with a task, and you look at it, and it's daunting. It's very complicated. You don't know where to start, but you just have to divide it into smaller and smaller and smaller tasks. And the main skill you need is this to think in abstractions. Mm-hmm. And actually architectural studies help with that a lot. Almost every student that graduated architecture has that abstract thinking. So almost every architectural student can switch to be a good programmer. Mm-hmm. It's not, I think it's not about math or or any other skill. It's mostly abstract thinking. And with the design automation, you have to just think in very large abstractions at first. So that's the hardest part, when you just receive the task and you need to find a way to start working on it. And then you at the very lowest level, you have to get to the math behind how everything works, and you just start writing it in notes and code, and putting it all together. If you do it that way, if you divide everything into as small piece as possible, it will always get into what you need. It will always work. But if you just rush doing one thing, okay, so you've got a task and you know how to do one particular thing, you do it in the fastest way you know, and you will get yourself into a lot of trouble because you can't progress from that point. You have to build a very good foundation. I always take a piece of paper, and every algorithm I create just starts on paper until I almost have I don't need to write the full code. I just sketch it out, but I will only start typing any characters in the computer after I get all the sketch completed on paper.
Nice. So could you tell us about any project that you found challenging that implemented design automation?
Yeah, so any project can can get benefit from design automation, but it actually only makes sense in the economy of scale. So like if you got 2 rooms and you're like, okay, so they all belong to specific rules. I can just place, for example, the bed there and the chair there. There's absolutely no reason to write an automation program to do that for 2 rooms. You will do it as a human much faster. So you always have to think like, okay, so how many times should this get done? Like, does it even make sense to go into code and try to automate it? And it's also like a mistake many people do. For example, like interns in my day job, they really like automation, but they try to automate everything. Like I'm like, okay, like why did you spend 4 hours trying to do it? Like your level isn't very high. You can do it really fast. You can even run into like dead points. So you spend 4 hours, you run into a dead point. So you basically done nothing beneficial, while you could make it by hand in like 10 minutes. Like, why did you do that? So the first question with automation is, do I need it? Like that's the main question. And then when you do automation, you're always like dragged into making it even better, like optimizing stuff. And you always have to give yourself that question, like, do I need it? Like, will it actually be beneficial? Will it make money or will it lose money?
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And do you feel that coding becoming more and more essential as a skill for architects? Do you feel that it should be included in the architectural education system?
I actually think that coding should be included in just like all higher education, at least bachelor level. So bachelor isn't actually like 100% specialization on your topic. Like if you're learning architecture as a bachelor, you will still have like 10-20% of subjects that are generic, that you would learn them in any course. In masters, maybe not, but in bachelor, I think like some simple programming's maybe like only 6 months training, maybe things like Python. Like Python is a very simple, powerful, and popular language, and I think it should be taught like everywhere. Not maybe high school, like programming isn't actually high school material. I think that way, but in university studies, it should be included.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember we had Java in school, and I used to mug up code and then go give the exams. So.
In school, you can take coding as just like, okay, so I have this set of rules, I have to write this program. So I was attending a course in C#, and most of my group was like freshman year university students. Like they were pretty young, and like if the task was very specific to what they were told to do, they were fine. They would do it perfectly. But if you go like left or right one step, they're just in panic mode. They don't know what to do. So they think about programming as like, I don't know, like memorizing text. But it doesn't work that way. Yeah, you have to understand it.
It's the logic, right?
Yeah, so in school, people are mostly used to just memorizing things, and you can't memorize programming. It's more like a university style studying.
All right, so the next steps, right? Now, if you talk about BIM, we jump from BIM to maybe IoT and then robotics and then inevitably AI. So what are your steps going forward?
For me, I just want to improve my current skills. I want to get more into JavaScript currently, into platforms like more into web-based platforms. I want to make some sort of like a Shapediver application, even at a very basic level. and stuff like that, like more proprietary websites. And also I want to work more on Blender. For example, Blender got like it has IFC now. So nice. It makes it a viable option for architecture. It's free. It's open source. It has a very good development community. Its API is completely open. So if some major architectural studio will start promoting Blender for architecture at some way, and it starts getting taught at universities, I think like at the current state, if you just look at everything in a nutshell, Blender is the best architectural software because you can make it your own and you completely own it, like Revit. So you pay for Revit yearly, and then Autodesk decides to change the subscription price, and you're like, okay, I've spent all this time in Revit, I have all my project there, I've written so many plugins for it, and okay, I can't afford it now. Like architecture isn't very well paid, and I just can't afford it. But those things can't happen with Blender because it's free, it's community owned, and so it puts it in the best position. If someone goes like, if some big players start promoting it, I think Blender is the best software because you will really own it. Even Archicad is pretty good, and Rhinoceros, actually Revit is in the worst spot because it was Revit you have to pay for a subscription, and subscription can change, and that's not a good thing at all. But you can at least buy a full license of Rhinoceros and Archicad and at least make all the projects and use all the plugins you made forever.
Yeah, but for the infrastructure projects in general, everyone uses Revit, right? Most of the bigger companies and...
Yeah, people use Revit, but there's IFC and Revit supports it. So the big vendors can't tie you into any software anymore. There's an open class where you can share geometry, you can share data embedded into geometry, you can share everything like PDF. Like, what would the world be without a PDF file format? For example, like if Microsoft Word invented its proprietary text file format and made Word only subscription based, like what would it be? It's not a competing environment. It's just like, it's bad. It wouldn't support any innovation that way. But at least every architectural software now uses IFC at a reasonably good level. So it allows any developer to create architectural software that could be integrated into the workflow of the studios. And if it's a good solution, it could just become the main one. So Blender could be integrated into any workflow, at least slowly at start, and start pushing everyone out.
Oh,
if
nice.
if it gets the support and media attention, but for me, Blender is in the best spot because if the developer community starts liking it, and they can develop things for it really fast. It just has no borders. You can do everything you like, and it's great. It doesn't work that way for Revit and Archicad.
And it's presently used mostly by animators and the video industry, right?
Yeah. So like Blender is just a platform. It's not only like a 3D modeling. You can do even 2D picture editing, like Photoshop in Blender. You can basically do anything, and it has a completely open API. So basically, like Blender has no boundaries.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you would suggest architects to pick up on Blender?
At least look at its site. Like if. For example, Ukraine, like every university teaches Archicad. So like you have no option other than to learn Archicad because like no one will take you for a job without it. And for example, for engineers, like Revit is a standard for MEP work. So like you have to learn Revit currently. But if you really like architecture, you'll probably want to spend some time at home, like playing with stuff. And I think that Blender is a good thing to play with.
Yeah, awesome. That's some great advice, Pavlo. I think our listeners would start picking up on Blender as well. So could you tell us more about 3D scanning, point scans, and something called photogrammetry?
It's very useful. So the 3D scanning is still pricey. Using an actual scanner is like, for example, the cheapest scanner you can do job done with is the Leica BLK 360, and it costs $1,500 plus tax. And that's a lot. Oh, it's actually not 15. It's $150 plus your
like
$15,000.
Okay,
plus tax.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot, and it provides really good results. I actually work with scans from it from time to time, but the other option is photogrammetry. So for photogrammetry, the software isn't very expensive. Like, it has very reasonable prices. For example, there are two main programs out there. It's Agisoft Metashape and Capturing Reality. So the first one costs $200 for the most basic license, and that's not a lot considering like a scanner costs $15,000. And the other one has a Steam version. It's a monthly subscription, but it has regional prices. So in Ukraine, it costs like $15 or $20 per month, and that's reasonable. Like, you can afford that easily. Like, even if you have like a small project once per month, you can justify buying it. So for photogrammetry, you can just go take your phone and start taking pictures and try how it works. And it's very good for scanning like building facades, especially like older buildings, scanning the basements, the attics that have the more complex structure. And when you get good at it, it will be much faster than actual like manual measurement with a ruler or a laser ruler. It gets much faster, plus you get the texture, plus you get a model for designers or visualizers. So like, if you go into a building, you can just picture every brick in the wall, and then you can know like which brick where is in what condition, if you can reuse it in your project, or if it's too bad, you have to plaster that wall and stuff like that. Photogrammetry, just getting a basic result isn't complicated. So so basically you just take your phone, you can download a trial version of Metashape or Capturing Reality, and you will get some result. It's more tricky to get a really good, precise result. So the highest precision I got was a 5-story staircase, and it was a 2 millimeters worrying between my measurement points. So I still made like some measurements with a laser ruler and made the scan. And it was just about 2 millimeters difference.
Yeah, that's
so
negligible.
Basically, it's very negligible. And I got like I got everything. I got the tiles on the stairs. I got the I basically got all the metal, all the windows. I also made a scan from the outside. I got the wall thickness, and it was an old building, and the wall thickness would change with height there, and it's very hard to measure. And with photogrammetry, I could get a very precise like wall thickness. So it goes from basically 700 millimeters at the first floor to like 250 millimeters at the last floor. And it's very complicated to measure by just like regular means. And photogrammetry gave me a perfect section.
And this is all from your phone?
So you start with a phone, and then you basically have to use a drone for facades, because they're they're high and you need to take pictures of the roof. And for the phone, like if you got a really good phone, it will work, but it's always cheaper to buy a mid-range camera than a really good phone. And a mid-range camera will have like much more sharpness, and the picture sharpness is the main factor in photogrammetry, not even the megapixel count. It has to be sharp, especially in low light condition, and the phone just doesn't give that.
Cool. And do you feel that this technology would primarily be used in renovation projects? And also we had the Notre Dame fire, right? So we had a digital twin of the project which helped in reconstructing the cathedral.
Yeah. So it's mostly renovation and the land scanning to get like the landscape for. So you still need to take a specially trained person with a certificate to do proper land measurements. But when you're just like when you haven't signed a contract and the customer just decides if he even wants to buy that land, you can just take a drone, take some pictures. You get a pretty rough. Well, not necessarily rough. It depends on how good your drone is and your skills and the mark points. But you can get a good sense of the landscape and start sketching the project. And you can just make some like cost estimation from that really quickly. And then the customer can decide if he needs all those services that are necessary for legalization and all that stuff.
Cool.
So like photogrammetry and drones, so they are actually even closer to being a part of like a regular architectural lives in coding, in my opinion, because they are more accessible, they require less time, and they provide like almost instant results. Like you still take pictures as an architect, and taking them at a more advanced level, and IRL pictures from a drone is just like your natural transition. But coding is kind of like a new direction. You have to start learning from scratch. It's not as intuitive.
Awesome. So I'm a regular architect and probably I'm an architecture student, and I want to jump into coding, creating scripts, automation, and I want to be like Pavlo. How does it all begin and how do I get started?
Probably Python. Just the best thing to do is to learn Python, and don't try to implement it in architecture right away, because architecture requires at least somewhat complicated algorithms. And at the start, even like making some if blocks with very simple evaluations is it requires some time, like just at the start of your coding career. So you have sites like Udemy, Coursera. For example, just a trick. At Coursera, most courses are paid, but you can request financial aid. So like if you're a student and you don't have extra money to pay for that course, you can just like write your situation to Coursera, and there is a very high chance they will just give that course to you for free.
So you've done this before, right?
Yes, I've actually received one course for free from Coursera when I needed it. Now it's now I wouldn't do that, but at that time I really needed the financial aid.
Which course is this?
It was a Python course, actually.
Okay, cool. All right. I just wanted to talk to you about BIM in Ukraine. BIM has become compulsory in most of the Scandinavian countries and most of the countries in Europe, right? So what is the scenario of BIM in Ukraine?
It's not mandatory. But all of the architectural students are taught BIM from like year 2006, maybe 2008. So all of the current architectural generation knows it, and all of the firms adopt it. Like every studio that's more than 5 people uses BIM in Ukraine. But BIM, like there's BIM and there's 3D modeling of architecture, and most firms actually use 3D modeling of architecture. It's not actually BIM, but it's at a reasonably good level without government enforcement. And when it starts getting there for like more complex projects like hospitals or something like that, that won't be a problem. There's plenty of people that are trained enough to do that.
And the standards and guides are also in place, right?
Yeah. So the standards are currently, Ukraine has a pretty good self-organized community. So there's an ISO for like generic BIM standards, and every country should have taken it and adopted it. But Ukraine didn't do it yet, but the community did. It's actually just like a job done by enthusiasts, but the community is good, and people who do actual BIM and not 3D modeling are mostly following it. So it kind of ruled itself out without any extra help, and it works well.
Nice. All right, Pavlo, we'll jump quickly into the quickfire round, and then I'll ask you the one last question.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So which book has inspired you the most as an architect?
It's not an architectural book, but I like the Jules Verne's like 3 books about Captain Nemo the most. Nice. I really like to go over them again.
Cool. Who do you like to work in collaboration with, maybe on an architecture project?
And like a specific person?
Yeah, any person that you admire or that you look up to.
Okay. Norman Foster.
Okay, cool. Which city is your favorite?
I haven't been in many cities, but it's Philadelphia in the US.
Okay. What does a daily routine in Pavlo's life look like?
Just get up at about 8:30 because I live 5 minutes walking from work.
Oh, nice.
Get to work, get back quickly, and start other work. And just go to bed whenever I'm just my eyes start closing. That's the daily routine.
So do you have late night shifts as well?
It's not a shift. I actually do. It's it's not very good to do coding work in like specific time frames. Mm-hmm. I work, so I have a 9 to 6 job. Actually, it was lunch break, and after that I work as I wish. But normally I just pick the task I feel like doing today, and I just keep doing it until I can, because for like in coding and in actual work, I try to get myself into a state of like courage. Like I just forget about everything. I just turn the music up, and I'm completely in it. And while I'm completely focused, I try not to look at time and not to go to bed while I can still work really efficiently. Because if I force myself to work, I don't work very, very well, like probably everyone. But I very often have that feeling of just like losing everything around, and it's just me and the work, and I work really fast in that state.
Oh, wow, that's pretty awesome. I think I need to also do that. So what kind of music do you listen to while working?
It's mostly cloud rap.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I listen actually to pretty strange music. I'm pretty ashamed of the lyrics, but I really like the music tonality and the beat.
Cool. Nice. And my last question to you is, what advice would you give to young architects and architecture students just getting started?
Just if you're just getting started, stop and think for a second if you feel it could be your passion. If yes, then just you'll be great. You'll manage everything. If not, just actually try thinking maybe you have other talents, because architecture isn't an easy career path at all.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Pavlo. It was a great conversation. I think we spoke quite a bit about the various softwares and the technicalities that goes beyond architecture. So thanks for your time. What's the best way our listeners could get in touch with you?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Cool. So I'll put in Pavlo's LinkedIn profile and all the other links in our show notes. And thanks again for coming on to the show. I hope to have you in the future episodes, and we could probably dwell deep into other topics which you specialize in.
Thank you.
All right.
You've been listening to the Archgyan podcast. We're still building the community. Please share this knowledge with someone you know who could benefit. Just send them to archgyan.com, where you'll find our free newsletter, and for more podcast episodes, search for the show on any major podcasting platform. Don't forget to subscribe where you're listening right now. And if you liked it, leave a rating or review.